Well, hi there. I'm here today with Anita, who is one of my favorite species on the planet. I've been thinking about sitting down and making a list. I mean, you can tell I love a lot of animals. I love, all animals a lot. But there are a few. I know whale sharks and manta rays are on this list of animals that just bring me absolute joy. And this one that I'm holding right now is on that list. This is the Peregrine Falcon. Peregrine falcons are the fastest animal on the planet. They can go into a dive and go over 200 miles an hour, which is preposterous. In fact, it's so fast that the air rushing into their lungs could cause serious lung damage, or even them to have a lung blowout, except for this crazy baffle they've got in their nose, which is actually being utilized to design jet engines. No big deal. They are basically the fighter jets of the bird world. They're amazing. I mean, they fly up high. They look mostly for birds flying around. They dive in at ridiculous speed and just punch them the heck out of the air or grab them. This is a ridiculous bird. A ridiculous bird. Oh my gosh, you're so cool. I love falcons generally. Falcons, all of them are fighter jets. This is just sort of the instant air superiority fighter of the falcon world. A lot of people don't know the differences between falcons and things like hawks and eagles. But hawks and eagles live a very different life from falcons. Hawks and eagles have these big slotted wings. If you look up in the sky and you see something with big broad wings that has fingers at the ends, a lot of the time, if it's kind of soaring around, hey, you're awesome, but you are the boss. If it's soaring around, it's usually either some sort of a vulture or a hawk or an eagle. And what they're doing is they're flying as slowly and in as energetically efficient a way as possible. And each of those little fingers in the wings acts like its own little airfoil. So they generate a huge amount of lift, which is important because they're not moving very quickly. And what they're doing is they're moving very, very slowly. They're moving very, very slowly. And they're just looking down at the ground and trying to find something down there. And then they'll dive down and grab it. But most of the time they're barely moving. Falcons have a completely different sort of a wing. The falcon wing is more narrow and pointed. It's a lot more like what you'd see on a swallow or a bird like that. These guys have an energetically fairly expensive flight, so they try not to fly except for when they're serious about getting to where they're going. But they are fast and they're maneuverable. And the reason for this is because they're usually doing air-to-air hunting. They're not just looking for stuff down on the ground that's not really going to go anywhere, and they just get it with the element of surprise. These guys have to win the air battle, and these guys win the air battle often. Another thing about falcons is on their beak, they've got kind of a little hooked tooth. You can actually see it really well on the falcon that the bad guy has in Mulan. This is a drawing, but they do a really good job of showing that little extra little hook that they've got on the beak, and that's something that falcons have that the hawks and eagles don't. But those are a couple of things you can look for, even when you're looking up at it from below, to decide, am I looking at a falcon or am I looking at a hawk or an eagle? And to me, there's just something about the falcons that's just a little bit more bad A, even though they're not often as large as the hawks and eagles. They're so rad. I mean, I'm grateful to have the opportunity to see, let alone hold a peregrine falcon like this, but I actually get to see a peregrine falcon because they didn't go extinct. And the truth is, there was a time not so long ago where it was looking like they might go extinct in the relatively near future. This was due to a pesticide called DDT that was being used that had a variable effect on different birds. And the thing is, birds like peregrine falcons, this was an insecticide. They don't eat a whole lot of insects, but they do eat a lot of things that eat insects. And due to something called bioaccumulation, they could end up with quite a bit of this chemical insecticide in their systems, and it actually didn't seem to affect the adult birds. But what it did do was weaken the eggshells, and so it caused their eggs to crack and collapse long before they could hatch. And so we were getting dramatically reduced recruitment of new peregrine falcons for about 30 years, while DDT was being really heavily used. And after we found out about this, it was largely banned. It's still used a little bit in areas with a lot of malaria, because it is a very effective insecticide. But fortunately, birds like the peregrine falcon and the bald eagle have been brought back from the brink of extinction because of the dramatically reduced use of DDT, and that's great. This peregrine falcon's name is Anita, and she comes to us from Utah's Reptile Adventures, which is a soon-to-be zoo here in the state of Utah, which that's going to be pretty cool. And it is a reptile zoo, but they do have birds, because birds are reptiles, and that's rad. Thanks for not jumping on my face. Can't believe how much I appreciate that. But yes, you're the boss. Absolutely. Oh, Jason, you're up! I mean, I don't know how much more I can say about how much I love peregrine falcons, because they literally are on my short list of my favorite animals, period. I love reptiles. All of them. And one of the reasons is because most reptiles make, well, for wild animals, great pets. Our question today is the peregrine falcon the right pet reptile for you? And yes, I do mean to say reptile when I say reptile, because birds are reptiles. And we've got a whole video on that you can check out. If you don't believe me, you can believe me in the past when I make a longer case for it. But they are living dinosaurs, and this one is arguably as cool as any dinosaur that's ever existed. Overall, we give the peregrine falcon a score of 1.4 out of 5, which is the worst score we've ever given anything on this channel. To help explain why they get this really quite abysmal score, we've broken it down into our normal 5 categories, which are handleability, care, hardiness, availability, and upfront costs. So let's start with handleability, shall we? I'm going to tell you one thing that's really striking me, which is that for a bird this size, they're actually pretty heavy. Most flighted birds are shockingly light, but this peregrine falcon, and it doesn't surprise me because I don't know how a bird as light as most birds are could ever get up to the speeds in a dive that these guys achieve. Their terminal velocity would just be too slow. And also having a little bit more mass behind them is going to be more devastating when they make contact with whatever it is they're hunting. So in retrospect, it all makes sense. And I've actually wondered if they're heavier than most birds because of that diving ability. I just can't figure out how other birds could possibly do it. And this is a fairly heavy bird, and my arm's getting tired handling it, which is different than a lot of other similarly sized flighted birds. That said, if they're imprinted on you, which means you got it as a baby, which isn't actually easy to do, they will be pretty good about handling, but they are kind of a nervous bird. They're high-strung. I mean, they're kind of in a spot in the food chain where a lot of things are harassing them. There are some things that hunt them and eat them, and at the same time, they need to be very, very alert to the possibility that prey might be around, because this isn't a bird that messes around. This isn't a bird that can be up high and go, oh, there's a rabbit down there, and I can surprise that anytime in the next 10 minutes. No, this is a bird that says there's a bird here right now, and it'll be here for the next 4 seconds, and I'm on it. And they make split-second decisions, and they go out and they kill stuff. And they're just hardcore as all get out. But they are a little nervous, which makes handling them a little bit nerve-wracking for you, because if this bird, say, jumps off and grabs my face, it's going to be the worst. I can also tell you, you're only going to want to handle a peregrine falcon on a heavy-duty falconry glove like this. And even so, at times, they can actually apply quite a bit of pressure with those talons. It's not a big deal, but it is something to consider. Overall, though, the main thing is this is what handling a peregrine falcon looks like. I mean, most of the time, you're not going to pet them. You're certainly not going to snuggle them. You're just going to let it sit on you, and it'll hang out there for a while. And as you've noticed, every now and then, it's going to decide, I'm going to try to fly away. And they do know how to get back up on the glove on their own, so it's nothing to stress about. But it's It's an awesome experience, but you know, it's not the same level of interaction that you can have with a lot of other pet reptiles. And that's okay. It's just different. When it comes to care is where things really fall apart for a Peregrine Falcon. It's bad. They get a score of 1 out of 5, and I can give a 0 out of 5. You know, I'd give that to maybe like a newborn baby, but this is pretty close. Let's start with the enclosure. Much like your newborn baby, they may need their own room, and in this case, they definitely need their own room. What they probably need is an outdoor shed called a mew, and in this case, I mean, it needs to be huge. It needs to literally be the size of a room in your house. And that's expensive. One thing that's wonderful about them, because they're endothermic, and it's the only wonderful thing about endothermic organisms, is that they can live outside year-round, at least within their range, because they generate heat from food that they eat. You know, unlike reptiles, which need to be in an environment that is warm enough so they can, you know, bask and in that way heat their body up to an adequate temperature. Every day, you are going to need to take your Peregrine Falcon outside for about an hour. I mean, while it can be standing on its own, you're going to have to be there to babysit it because other birds are going to harass it. And it's going to, you know, it could have a bad day if you're not there with it. So that's an hour a day that you need to block out every day. You're also going to need to feed your bird every single day, which means you're going to need to have feeders on hand. For a bird-eating bird like this, I'd recommend mostly frozen thawed birds. And you're going to need to clean up after them, because the downside of being an endotherm is that they use a lot of food to heat their bodies. In fact, most of what they eat, they will burn for heat, just like you do. And that means that they make a lot of messes. They're going to poop all the time. I'm sure the bloopers of this video will be mostly falcon poops. And that's because they poop all the time, and so you need to clean up diligently after them. You also need to keep their beak and nails trimmed, which they hate. So that's a wonderful chore. Pretty sure it's not, but I've never had to do it, but oh my gosh. They're also susceptible to infections, one of them called bumblefoot, which they can get if their perches and other places where they stand are not adequately clean and just, you know, nice enough on their feet. This is something that can kill them, so something you definitely need to be aware of. You know, and the biggest thing, and this is kind of true for endotherms generally, but, you know, especially for birds of prey like the Peregrine Falcon, you can't leave them alone for any extended period of time. Like, you know, if you're gonna go on vacation or anything, you're gonna need somebody over at your house every day, maybe multiple times a day, for a long period of time, taking care of your Peregrine Falcon. And it's kind of hard to find that friend. There are a lot of people who would love to come and do it for 2 days, right? Because what an experience. Like, that's honestly probably the ideal amount of time to have a Peregrine Falcon, is for about 2 days and then be like, well, that was fun, and then move on with your life. However, if you're the person that actually got a Peregrine Falcon, this is now what your life looks like, and you need to have some solid friends that are going to help you out if you ever are going to leave town. And that gets us to hardiness. When it comes to hardiness, we give the Peregrine Falcon a score of 1 out of 5. Even experienced falconers, and you know, falconry is different from the reptile hobby, because you can't just decide, you know, I think I'm going to get a falcon today. That's not a thing. There's nobody like that. Falconers go through examinations and inspections and years of apprenticeships and lots of licensing and hoops before they can get a falcon. And even these experienced, trained falconers, they lose birds sometimes. It's just a reality because they're not very hardy. All kinds of weird accidents can happen. When you've got something that flies and you're keeping it in a box, weird stuff can happen to them, right? They can crash into the side. They can break a feather that's still vascularized and bleed out. They can get all kinds of infections and other illnesses. There's just so much that can go wrong. They need near constant supervision, and even under the best of circumstances, at times, an accident could take them just like that, or an illness. You can just lose a bird. When it comes to availability, we give these guys a score of 1 out of 5, but that was a tentative one, right? That's like an optimistic one because in a lot of cases it's a 0. First of all, you probably need to be a licensed falconer, but that's not it. Because these guys very nearly went extinct not very long ago. They're still recovering, and so in order to go out and get a peregrine falcon, it's not just about being a falconer, you also need to win the lottery. They draw tags. Oh yeah, you're a good falcon. Yeah. They draw tags to be able to go out and get a peregrine falcon. And so just because you want one and just because you're certified does not mean that you can get your hands on a peregrine falcon. To own a peregrine falcon, at least in the United States, you need permitting. You must have the permits. You must either be a falconer or have legitimate educational permits. Otherwise, they're totally off limits and you'll go to jail. And like we've talked about a little bit, I mean, falconry is the easiest way to get the permits to get involved with the lottery so that you could maybe get a peregrine falcon. But falconry is serious. It is serious. And you're going to be working at it for years. So gear up. When it comes to upfront costs, we give the peregrine falcon a score of 1 out of 5. The animal, if you win the lottery, is actually not ridiculously expensive. The permitting is, I mean, it's going to cost some money, but it's not ridiculous. It's cheaper than a lot of the reptiles we've talked about on here, actually. But this enclosure that they're going to need, that's serious. I mean, the most intense monitor enclosures that we've talked about are about the size of this thing. So, big. The mew, which is that shed that they need, that's big. You're going to have to build it yourself, and it's going to cost a lot of money. On top of that, you're going to need other falconry things. Things like anklets and jesses, scales to weigh them, a bath pen, a weathering perch, a hawk box, a glove like this. And if you don't know what these things are, don't worry, you'll have years as an apprentice to learn what these things are. And they do add up a little bit because most of them aren't available on Amazon. You also need to have a large supply of frozen birds and other vertebrate feeders to offer to them before you get one, because it will literally have starved to death before a shipment of frozen thawed anything can get to you. So that's an upfront cost. In conclusion, we give the peregrine falcon a score of 1.4 out of 5. And honestly, that was us giving them the benefit of the doubt. Endotherms generally suck. And then if you want an endotherm that's rebounding from the verge of extinction, well, it gets really difficult. This is one of the coolest animals on the planet. Absolutely. Like, I am so happy that I've had this experience. I love this bird. I cannot believe I'm getting to interact like this with a peregrine falcon. And I think everybody should have this experience. But my gosh, I do not want a peregrine falcon at all. At all. It is probably one of the worst pet reptiles you could possibly get, and that's if you win the lottery. As always, like and subscribe. I'd like to thank those of you on Patreon who support us. Among the perks that we have for our patrons at Patreon is a podcast that we put on, and I'm pretty sure we've talked about peregrine falcons a whole lot of times because they're one of the things I think are the coolest of all things in the world. And so if you spend any considerable amount of time with me, at some point we're going to have a discussion about peregrine falcons. If you want to listen to all those podcasts, please come support us on Patreon. Hope to see you real soon. Okay, so get this one close.
Same deal. Get her right up there. She'll sit on your hand.
There you go.
Keep a hold of this.
Yes. All right. Well, this is a thing I've never done before.
Right now she's just warning you because she wants you to recognize that she's the boss.
You are the boss. Believe me. Thanks for not jumping on my face. Can't believe how much I appreciate that. But yes, you're the boss. Absolutely. Oh, Jason, you're up.
Oh, worse if it was a hawk, it would be on the ground.
Oh man, this one I'm a little nervous with.
This is such a great day for me. I get to handle birds and I get to watch Jason clean up raptor crap.
That is a lot of poop.
You will wash your hands before you Eat anything, won't you?
Nice.
Yeah.
Alright, girl. Don't hurt me.
Ooh, Falcon. Things are gonna get
Oh my
easier.
gosh, that's huge.
Same noise she does when she's getting fed and she thinks you're gonna steal her food.
I promise I won't steal your food. I don't even want that stuff. Yeah, get it. Just a camera. Work it. I think we better. Don't land on my head. That's our agreement, okay? You can poop on the table all you want.
We got Jason.
Yeah. That's
Too
you
thick.
can add this to your resume.
Yeah. That's so cool. Such a pretty bird. Pretty bird.
Yeah.
Pretty bird.